anyone who has a mobile phone to please make sure that it is switched off or at least in silent mode during the hearings. And also ask everyone to make sure that they sign the attendance list, which is just outside the far doors. I shall aim to have a break mid-morning and to have a lunch break at about 1 o'clock. I'm now going to ask those participating this morning just to briefly introduce themselves. We've got a limited number of people here today, so we should be able to have an informal discussion without worrying too much about upending Toblerones when you want to speak. But if you could use the microphones, that helps people at the back of the room to hear. So I'll just ask Mr. Derbyshire to introduce himself.
My name is Michael Derbyshire. I head up the planning team for Bid Wells, and I'm here on behalf of the University of Cambridge. Representation was originally made by Cambridge Assessments, but as I said out in my statement, the matters have moved on significantly now, and an opportunity to discuss the 4 sites in a little bit more detail, and I will go through that in answer to the questions on the agenda.
Thank you. Good morning, Frances Schultz, Cambridge City Council Planning Policy Officer.
Good morning, Joanna Gilbert-Aldridge, Principal Planning Policy Officer, Cambridge City Council.
Sarah Saunders, Planning Policy Manager at the City Council.
Thank you. We'll turn now to my agenda for today. I've tried, in drawing up the agenda, to distill the matters and issues down to what appear to be the principal controversial issues remaining between you. But I'd like to start just with one point of clarification for my benefit. In your statement, Mr. Derbyshire, you say that, in your introduction, you say that you're vacating all 4 sites and going to relocate within a single new development currently under construction called the Triangle. Can you and the council help me with this? We have on our programme, some time in the future, an emissions site called the Triangle. Is that the same Triangle site? It's 1 to 4 Hills Road, 13 Harvey Road and Shaftesbury Road is the site that we've got as an emission site.
I think it must be. I think it must be the same site that's listed as an emission site.
I would just point out though that the Triangle site is off Shaftesbury Road and is not linked to Hills Road and Gondel Place. They're not geographically proximate.
No. I think the reason that I'm asking is, as you know, I issued an inspector's note fairly early on explaining that where sites had received planning permission, we wouldn't be holding hearing sessions. Well, if this site is under construction, there's patently no point holding a hearing session on it as an emission site, and it simply means that Miss Alexander can get out her red pen and take it out the programme.
Yes, yeah, we absolutely agree, and it would be one that has permission and under construction, and would fall into that classification.
Okay, thank you. We will act accordingly then. Okay, moving on then to the points on my agenda. This first issue seems, as far as I understand it, to have been resolved by the council's proposed modification. Is that the correct interpretation, Mr. Derbyshire?
That's my understanding. We are very keen to include One Regent Street and extend the boundary just further south I dealt with the application for the University Arms Hotel, which is going to include some significant upgrade on the Regent Street elevation, an additional 70 bedrooms. My client is keen to engage with the street scene and make improvements, and that seems entirely consistent with Policy 24 and an omission. It would be an opportunity lost, so we're keen to extend the opportunity out to Regent Street and the building behind Furnace Lodge.
And you're obviously content with that approach?
Yes,
as you
as
set
picked
out?
up from and set out
Yes,
from the council's
yes.
statement.
Yes, I think my only comment which I put here is that I think that changing the extent of an area would need to be a subject of a major modification, not a minor. But as we discussed the other day, it looks as though you're going to need to have another round of major modifications consultations, so it isn't going to affect the length of the examination if you add this one in.
Yes, and we accept with a number of modifications that we've put forward that we may consider them to be minor, but you and Mr Wood will look at those and decide whether you think they are minor or major. So we understand that's the process that you will go through and come to a conclusion.
Yes, we'll be writing to you in due course about that. But yes, okay. Well, thank you. That's very helpful. So, moving on to the second point under Policy 24, would the policy be consistent with the proposals for Hills Road as set out in the transport strategy? Mr Derbyshire?
We have no objection in principle, and we believe. We have no objection in principle, and believe broadly that it is consistent. But the purpose of the strategy is Hills Road is a route where bus priority is required. Our concerns is there will be hopefully substantial redevelopment on these sites. It's a matter of coordination and technical coordination. We are looking, as we hope to do, to improve the streets and create active frontages. And we need to be sure that the pavements that are left and the areas that we have are environments that are valuable and can contribute. So for us it's a matter of coordination. We weren't engaging with substantial street scene improvements for 2 years later for the local authorities to dig it up and widen the road to accommodate the bus priorities. We just need to have some comfort on the technical integration of what we propose, the opportunity area and the county council strategy. So no objections, it's a matter of coordination, implementation, integration, what my client would hopefully seek to achieve.
The measures put forward in Policy 24, criterion F to L, and were taken from Project Cambridge, which was a reference document RDCC 360. And these measures were carried forward into the transport strategy for Cambridge and South Cambridgeshire and included 2 interventions, Policy TSC SC9, which is on page 4-7 of RDT 120, and also this was aimed at improving bus transit through the Hills Road corridor. And the second intervention was Project Cambridge, which is on page B7 of the same document in the action plan, which identifies measures to significantly improve the experience of pedestrians and cyclists travelling between the city centre and the railway station. So this ensures a comprehensive approach to transit through the city for vehicles and also for cyclists and pedestrians, linked in with public realm improvements, which are also included in the criterion F to L Policy 24. These measures are now being brought forward by City Deal proposals, which include a package of measures such as peak time congestion controls, which include road closures on Hills Road, workplace parking levy and a review and expansion of on-street parking controls by the County Council. These measures will work alongside other City Deal measures, such as the Hills Road bus corridor, to improve and displace, or to cater for displaced car trips. These measures, implemented by City Deal through the County Council policies and Policy 24, are in line and will free up space on the roads, encourage more sustainable transport and allow the possibility of improved public realm, including wide pavements.
If I could just pick up as well, just addressing Mr Derbyshire's concern about the interaction between different organisations, just to highlight the consultation that's going on at the moment and will be going on to October, that Ms Schultz has mentioned, includes peak time congestion issues and tries to address the Hills Road corridor as well as a number of other corridors in the city. That City Deal project has been signed off by the board, which includes the County Council, the City Council and Mr Derbyshire's client, the University of Cambridge, which is a signatory to the City Deal, and numerous workplaces as well as the main organisations involved in the City Deal will be responding to the consultation on peak time congestion within the Hills Road corridor. That peak time congestion work doesn't necessarily include physical measures on streets, such as the existing cordon situation with bollards, which you will have seen around the city. It's actually more virtual closures than that, and that's aimed directly at improving the bus situation, but also improving the situation for cyclists, pedestrians, emergency vehicles and taxis within that area. So with that work, we do see that there is a strong interaction between the different organisations involved within the city, moving from the city centre up to the station area.
Yeah, it's just one thing that does jump out of that statement is the workplace parking levy. It comes no surprise, and the implications that has for the end users on buildings in the opportunity area. If there is a levy, particularly with commercial buildings, there'll need to be, commercial clients will need to think very carefully about how they approach redevelopment, because if there is going to be a tax on parking spaces, that will affect how clients will approach the redevelopment buildings in the opportunity area.
I don't think the parking levy is something which is set out in the local plan though, is it? So it's probably not an issue for me.
I think that's right. I think Ms Schultz mentioned it in relation to looking at the City Deal and the proposals that are being currently consulted on in relation to the city centre and congestion. I accept Mr Derbyshire's point and concerns and the implications, but presumably that will be part of responding to that specific consultation that the City Deal is currently carrying out.
Not concerns, that's too strong a word, but we work in the commercial world and we need to be aware of potential changes, and particularly with allocations and employment applications, what that could mean.
Are there any specific changes that you're looking for in relation to the wording in the draft local plan?
It was essentially in terms of the flexibility of the uses on the site and the employment uses and the preference to the...
Okay, well, we'll come on to that, but it was in relation to this point about the transport strategy or not. Okay, fine. Let's move on then to site E5, which is, I think, where you're concerned about the employment versus mixed use issue comes in. I've noted on the first point that there seems to be a measure of agreement between you that it wouldn't be appropriate to extend this allocation. So I don't think we need to spend time on that. And the next point is, I think, the point that you were just raising, Mr Derbyshire. So if you want to expand on that, I wasn't quite sure from your written submission whether this concern applied only if that allocation were to be extended, or whether it applied to the allocation as proposed.
As proposed.
Okay, well, if you want to expand on that.
For me, the thrust of Policy 24 is, and we go to Policy 24, is to promote and coordinate the use of sustainable transport modes, which we've just discussed, and deliver and reinforce a sense of place in local shops and services. We entirely agree with that sentiment, and will feel that an exclusive employment allocation would restrict both the ability to engage with the street scene, provide genuine public engagement, because it's use of the buildings that create a sense of places. And also, in terms of the size of the site, as we've said, it's a substantial site. It will be a significant impediment to development if there wasn't an ability to mix the uses on the site. And that's where we start to come to the parking ratios. So parking, even with the best will in the world, there will be reduction in parking, but there will be it won't be a no parking situation. I'm dealing with the CV1 development around the station. And whilst that radically moved parking away from current standards to a much lower standard, commercial market in Cambridge is that parking is required. We're in an air quality management area, and parking is the predeterminant of that air quality. So in terms of maximising the opportunity in the area, mix of uses would allow maximum opportunity to develop the site, having regard to the constraints on it. And also the flex of uses will also bring the benefits that I think Policy 24 is strictly seeking to achieve in terms of sense of place and sustainability. So that's why the mix is key to the success of bringing these sites forward.
I'll start, and other colleagues may want to add, but I just want to go back to the council's evidence base and just go through kind of how we arrived at this allocation in the sense of employment and the council's employment needs. That is set out in Policy 2. And our evidence base very much says there's a need for office accommodation in the city centre, and it recognises that there are little opportunities in and close to the centre for office accommodation, and this is a good location that can assist in that provision. And that's picked up through the Cambridge Cluster at 50 study, which is RDE 060, and the Council's Employment Land Review, which is RDE 020. And the Employment Land Review has a number of references to the need for good quality office accommodation, the opportunities as they arise in the city centre for intensification, and also has a section on the office market in Cambridge. So we very much started with our evidence base, and also a discussion with Cambridge Assessment back in 2012 when we were preparing for Issues and Options 2, and that was the site options consultation prior to putting the submission plan together, and we had a dialogue about this particular site, and at that point in time they were very much in support of redevelopment of the site for solely employment use. We carried that forward into the consultation at the beginning of 2012, and also then followed that forward to the allocation in the proposed submission plan. And we say in Policy 2, which talks about our employment and how we are looking to meet our employment requirements, that a number of allocations are set out in the proposal schedule to help meet those requirements. And E5 is one of those. It also falls within the opportunity area, Policy 24, which is about the public realm improvements along that corridor, and Ms Schultz has already explained how that opportunity area arose with joint working with the County Council from an early stage, and that again is in our evidence base and has been taken forward. So I think it's quite important to understand that as in terms of how the council arrived at the allocation, and has evidence bases pointing to a need for office accommodation and intensification of office accommodation. We recognise that our evidence base is obviously taken at a specific point, and Ms Schultz will be able to provide more information that we have, more up-to-date information, to explain that actually we understand there is still a need for office space and prime office space in the city centre location. So we understand that from our evidence base there is a need, and that need still exists. I'll leave it there for the moment, because I think there are some other points that Mr Derbyshire has mentioned in relation to active frontages and the streetscape and the sense of place that we would also like to come back to.
Mr Derbyshire.
Yeah, thank you. In our submission, we refer to the fact that this is a significant site, and certainly one of the intentions would be to intensify the commercial uses on the site, but that would be a natural consequence of redeveloping a 1965 office building. That's a big part of the site. But there will be limitations on the size of that site for the commercial market and also deliverability. A size of that site will deliver many hundreds of thousands of square feet of commercial floor space. But it will be limited by, one, the car parking situation. The car parking situation, this isn't just the council standards, this is what users will want to use, will dictate the extent of the development on the site, and I just think that is a limitation. Other appropriate town centre uses, and they're defined in the NPPF, would be car-free and would allow much more efficient and mixed use on this site than a solely homogeneous commercial building. It is far more appropriate to have a mix of uses, which is precisely what the NPPF is requiring, and I think there is a degree of conflict between that and the objectives of Policy 24, which is about mixed uses, which is about Kempton Hills Road, which is about public realm. And I think that a commercial building, an exclusively commercial building, will struggle to deliver those objectives.
I think we take a different view. I've gone through kind of our evidence base and how we've arrived at that. We do have a concern about kind of the mix of uses that has been presented to us. I think in the original representations it was a whole range of uses, not just retail and leisure that's presented in Mr Derbyshire's current statement. I think it included a hotel, students, and lots of others. So a whole range of uses was kind of put in the representation and presented to us without anything to really back that up. And we understand that a mix of uses may be helpful, but for this allocation we would want to see a predominant employment allocation and intensification coming forward, and we wouldn't want other uses to jeopardise that. We think there's been some misinterpretation of the council's evidence base in relation to retail and leisure uses in Mr Derbyshire's statement, and Ms Gilbert-Waldridge can outline our position in relation to that. But I think it's important to point out that the location of this allocation isn't in the city centre as defined in terms of retail, and it's not in the Hills Road local centre either. So that is a consideration that we think is quite important.
So just to pick up, in terms of in terms of employment, the city centre is considered to include the main city centre as for retail, and then it also includes what's known as the Golden T, I believe, which is basically Hills Road going up to Station Road and including Station Road down to the station. The retail city centre boundary is, as Ms Saunders has mentioned, at the Lensfield Road junction. So this site lies just beyond the primary shopping area, and then the Hills Road Local Centre is again beyond that. It's a busy corner. It's known as Hyde Park Corner locally, and we would be concerned about any provision of retail facilities where there could be an impact on servicing, although obviously recognise that depending on the redevelopment of the site, that could be managed via a side road. In terms of the issue with the Retail and Leisure Study Update 2013, where we think misinterpretation may have come in is that that study refers to Cambridge Leisure Park at paragraph 510 onwards, and then refers to the station area at 516 to 518. And both of those areas are places where we were advised by the leisure study to have potential new retail centres, and we have included those as potential designations within the emerging plan. But Cambridge Leisure Park is some distance away over the other side of the Hills Road Bridge, and the station area shopping offer is also some way away. So I think the information that's contained in that section 5 has been misinterpreted and rolled forward to this area, which is close to but not within the city centre and not within the Hills Road Local Centre either. Just a further issue on uses, there was the issue of student accommodation raised within the statement, and whilst we recognise the University of Cambridge's ongoing need for student accommodation and have been in discussions with them for some time about this issue, you'll be aware, Ms Graham, of the study that we're commissioning with Oxford City Council to undertake further assessment of the various institutions in Cambridge's need, and that study has not yet been completed, so we don't feel able at this point in time to confirm whether or not student accommodation would be appropriate on this site as part of a mix with employment uses or any other uses at this point. We can obviously advise you of the findings when they come out.
The advantage of the mix, remember, is the air quality management area acknowledged in this statement. I've been dealing with CB1, which is the development that's been referred to a couple of times since 2006. And one of the major drivers that's implemented in that area is the air quality management area. And the fact that once you start attracting cars, that is the sole determinant of air quality in this area. But for me, the fact that you need to have flexible uses that recognise that are genuinely car-free, and student is one of them, just adds to the flexibility of that opportunity area and the ability to develop a more intensive, more flexible use. I'm a little bit concerned about, I think the relationship, it's not my place, but the relationship with that study and the local plan looks like your study, which I understand is available in December. Reading the reports in December.
Mike, can you turn on your microphone, please? Thank you.
Apologies. Will that be in time to inform this?
Well, as I understand it, the study is being undertaken jointly with the City of Oxford for probably obvious reasons. And consultants are to be appointed soon, and what I have said, so far as the examination is concerned, is that we will hold off dealing with those parts of the plan which are very intimately affected by that until that study is in place, which almost certainly means that we will move on from dealing with these hearings specific to the Cambridge City Plan, deal with some or all of the South Cambridgeshire specific hearings, and then come back to this. So it's going to be some time away, and the council advised me the other day that they thought that modifications would be needed probably. I mean, no one will know until the study is completed, but they've obviously got it in their mind that it's likely that modifications will have to come forward. We're looking at quite a protracted situation.
As someone who's doing an appeal in Oxford on student numbers at the moment, I understand that one of the generators of that report was the appeal decision in Mill Road, wasn't it? Which I understood said there was a compelling need for student accommodation in the city. So it's not a matter that there isn't a need, it's a matter for the authority trying to establish what the extent of that need is.
We obviously, as part of preparing the plan, worked with the University of Cambridge and ARU and other institutions in establishing that need. What's happened since we put the proposed submission consultation together is that need has changed. We've had an appeal decision. The planning practice guidance came out, which said that you could consider counting student accommodation, and we want a number of factors that have led us to update our evidence base and take on board the changes since we prepared the plan, because we think it's appropriate to do that and feed that into the examination, and it's kind of the responsible thing to do. And dependent on what that says, we're obviously alive to a number of issues that have come up through the examination like this, where depending on what comes through, we're aware of those, and those factors may feed in, but we just don't know at the moment, and we need the work to be undertaken.
It is relevant because my client obviously is the University of Cambridge, and they will have an interest very much so in the outcome of this allocation.
And they will be party to the work on the study.
I guess they'll have a better opportunity than most to feed into that study.
My concern is over the E5 is that relationship is the door closed on E5 if there's found to be a compelling need, and this isn't necessarily a bad location for that type of accommodation.
I think we're saying that we just don't know at the moment, so we're alive to the issue and what's been put forward through your statements. It could be a possibility, but we just don't know until the work has been done, and it could be one of a number of possibilities.
Well, I will keep an open mind on it. We're in a slightly difficult situation. In an ideal world, the evidence base would be complete here, the plan would be submitted here, and there wouldn't be any significant changes which would cause anything to be revisited. But I think we all know that that's a counsel of perfection, and we have to deal with it in the most pragmatic way that we can. Yes, I mean, I'm quite happy to say that I won't come to any firm conclusions in relation to this until the outcome of the study and the council's consideration of that is before me. And should I think it's necessary, I can of course reconvene this session. So I won't close my mind to that, but I'm not obviously making any promises. Okay. So, were there any other points around the mixed uses issue?
If I could just come back to Mr Derbyshire's point about kind of the mix of uses in order to create a sense of place. I think we do take a different view to that, because I think it comes down to the design and the design of buildings and how that interacts with the street and the streetscape. We don't think it's just about the uses. It's about the proximity to the building, to the street, and how it engages with the street and the building line. And we do think that there are good examples on Hills Road of that active frontages creating a sense of place, and passerby, if you're walking or cycling, you understand the nature of that use and what's happening within that building. A good example, a recent example, is number 51 Hills Road. We consider to be a good example. and that is for high quality commercial office accommodation. And that's very much, the building is on close to the edge of the streetscape, but you very much get a feel for the active frontage and the sense of place as part of that development. But I think there are other examples on Hills Road, particularly in relation to retail, where it doesn't engage with the street. So I don't think it necessarily means the mix of use creates that sense of place. It is very much about the design of the development and that interrelationship. And an example of that we consider of retail not engaging along, well with the streetscape is 29 to 31 Hills Road. That unit very much turns its back on the street and doesn't engage with the frontage at all. So as a pedestrian or a cyclist, you really don't have a feel for the nature of that use and a welcoming environment. And in fact that you would even know that that is a retail use. So I think it comes down to design, which there are a number of policies in the plan that can deal with that, and we just don't accept that the mix alone means it leads to a sense of place and an active frontage. It goes deeper than that.
Can I also just take the opportunity to highlight one of the other allocations within the emerging plan, which is R44 or M44. If you look at other parts of the council's statement on matters CC2, which is Botanic House, just a little further up the road, adjacent to the Botanic Gardens, which is occupied by the Mills and Reeve law firm, and that is you can very obviously read that as an office building, but because of the way it's been designed, it does actually interact with the space differently from perhaps older office buildings. That building also highlights a situation where developers have been more accepting of less parking provision, and this is further highlighted by the Employment Land Review 2012, which is RDE 1020. At paragraph 3.29, the Employment Land Review highlights that there's been more of a move towards kind of London culture of people being more accepting of using sustainable modes to reach their workplace. And we've also looked at more recent information that's been produced by local and national agents, which has highlighted that there's a limited number of opportunities within the expanded city centre for employment purposes, and there is still quite high demand for office space within this area, and quite high rental yields. So we feel confident that actually employment is still a good fit for this particular site, which, as Ms Saunders has said, was backed up by Cambridge Assessment's response to us at issues and options just prior to preparing issues and options 2.
Thank you.
R44, the office, it's part of a mixed-use allocation, isn't it? So the office is the first element, and then there's substantial residential allocation as part of that.
The office part is the only part that's come forward at this stage.
But the allocation is a mixed-use allocation. The purpose of this, the purpose of good design is good places to visit, to work in. And when we talk about a sense of place, a commercial building will be less within the world. The activity will quieten down after 6, 7 o'clock in the evening, even with long working hours. The purpose of a mixed-use development is to, whilst this isn't formally in a town centre designation, it clearly is part of the very central part of Cambridge and is a very vibrant, active area, is that it will be a loss of an opportunity if this valuable site effectively closed down at 6:30 in the evening because it was a commercial building. It has much more to offer than that. And what the mixed uses will do is provide that opportunity for leisure and for later night activity, which define and make a sense of place, which I think is the overriding tenet, connecting that sense of place in the opening statement to policy 24. It is about reinforcing a sense of place, which to my mind means that it doesn't stop at 6 o'clock in the evening.
I think we recognise that every site can't do everything, despite its location. And we go back to this site being a key site and a prime site in terms of its location for predominantly office accommodation, which there is a need for, and which feeds into our employment requirements. I don't want to continue to kind of repeat ourselves, but we very much feel that is really key and fundamental to this, and you can't have mixed use necessarily on every site. There will be some sites where it is appropriate to have a predominant use. And we haven't had kind of any tangible evidence presented to us that there are kind of specific proposals at this stage which that we can imagine that could be incorporated as part of that, other than saying kind of headline mixed use. And we have to set that in context of our own evidence base and what our own evidence base says and has told us. And at the moment we haven't had any other information to respond to in that sense.
Predominantly commercial use is fully understood. Exclusively commercial is my client's concern.
Just point out that originally when we started this work, Mr Derbyshire's clients did indicate to the council very much support for the redevelopment of the site solely for employment use. And obviously the council has to take that information along with the evidence base and use that and take it as a starting point as part of preparing the plan and in plan making. We accept that circumstances can change, but in this instance we feel that there is still the evidence base to support that predominant use.
You're using the word predominant, and Mr Derbyshire, I think, would be happy with that. So I'm sensing that you're not all that far apart.
I think I mentioned earlier that we accept that if we move forward, there could be detail that could come forward to support some uses, but at this current stage where we are with the allocation, we don't have any of that evidence, and would be concerned about starting to go down the route of outlining other uses in the allocation at this stage without that evidence. There may be justification at a later stage, in a more detailed stage, which can be dealt with through the plan, but at this stage, on the evidence that we've got, our focus is on employment and intensification for employment.
Yeah, and we will certainly intensify the development on the site. That's an absolute given. What we have is a series of 1960s and 1970s buildings that are grossly inefficient. So there will certainly be substantial intensification of that site, but an employment, the B1A restriction will limit the amount of development on this site, and I think that's what I'm not getting across very clearly. Because of the commercial market, because of the single use, it will limit the amount of development that will be able to be put on this site. Putting the car parking in just to accommodate the needs of one user will limit the amount of development on this site, and there will be car parking. All the buildings on CV1 have car parking associated with it. Even at the high levels of +1 to 100, it will generate car parking, which is hugely expensive, which will limit the ability of this site to develop. The advantage of alternative uses, they are car-free, and they allow a greater intensification of the site for appropriate town centre uses, without limiting your overriding aspiration, which is to increase the amount of commercial floor space on this site, which is also my client's aspiration. It is, I think, your policy is pulling us back from achieving the maximum that we could achieve on this site by being a monoculture.
But I still think we have to recognise the other policies and proposals in the plan, and particularly in relation to retail and leisure. This site is not located, it may be close to the city centre in terms of retail and leisure, and close to an existing local centre, but it still isn't within either of those. And I think we have to be mindful of that. And I think what we would be concerned about is any uses, kind of, because there has been a long list of uses put in previous representations and statements, that those uses, those alternative uses, begin to take over and open the door for those to become the more dominant use. And I think we would be concerned about that.
Okay, thank you. I think we've covered that point, which actually brings me to the end of my agenda. So I'm going to offer you the opportunity, if you want to just sum up the points that you've made this morning. But if you feel that everything's been said, that's fine.
I think you've heard enough from me today.
Okay. Yes, normally summing up is good when we've got 20 people around the table, but with small numbers. And the council, you're happy, are you?
I think we are. I think we've made our position clear in relation to the allocation and the evidence base, and consider it to be soundly based and us in moving forward.
Thank you. Well, as we established during the course of this morning, I'm not going to be able to come to any firm conclusions until we've got the student accommodation study and whatever the implications are that come out of that. I think it's likely that, well, depending on what comes out of that, I could ask you for some further written representations, and if absolutely necessary, we could reopen this hearing session. But subject to that, I think that's as far as we can go at the moment. So thank you all for your participation this morning, and I'm now going to adjourn until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock here. Thank you.